Cultivated meat essentially involves taking a small amount of cells and then propagating that cell material to a form where you can actually scale that up using something called bioreactors.
The biggest challenge has been the cost of manufacturing. The first ever burger that was made cost something like $27,000. But I think a lot of strides have been made over the past, say, 3 or 4 years. There's going to have to be some thinking about how to make sure that there's enough food for everyone, even in places that are relatively food secure at the moment.
We want people to be at a point where they know what this technology looks like, what they can contribute to it, and the only way for them to be able to do that and for us to be able to develop that talent is by being able to share what we do and then being able to kind of give them tools to build those skills.
Hello and welcome to Scaling Green Tech. We are Catherine Keddy and Matt Jaworski, co-founders of Adopter. Adopter was Europe's first marketing agency to specialise in climate tech and adaptation. In this podcast, we take you behind the scenes of climate tech's most inspiring journeys, from breakthrough scaling wins to game-changing innovations. Join us for practical lessons, proven strategies, and actionable insights from founders, investors, and changemakers making climate solutions and adaptations a reality.
Welcome back to Scaling Green Tech with me, Catherine Keddy. I'm here with two very exciting guests, Karen and Prithvi. Karen is a co-director of NAPIC, the National Alternative Protein Innovation Centre, and Prithvi is the head of partnerships at Extracellular. As is tradition on Scaling Green Tech, I want to come in with our classic first question. I'll come to you, Karen, first. How would you describe NAPIC to a 5-year-old?
Thanks very much. And thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here, even though I've never done this before. I think the way I would start to describe NAPIC is that we need to find new foods for a growing population, and also ones that maybe don't damage the climate and the earth as much as they do now. And as people invent these, they're going to try to manufacture them on large scale, but that's a really difficult process, taking something brand new and making a lot of it and getting it on supermarket shelves. So NAPIC's role is really to help businesses who are making these new products really grow and be able to reach the consumers and the people who will buy the new products.
Amazing, amazing. Prithvi?
Great question. So from my side, well, Extracellular, the way we like to perhaps think of ourselves, well, with respect to how we want to communicate that to a 5-year-old really, is probably that in terms of day-to-day products, so things that you have access to at home, things that you see around, it could be in your fridge, it could be on a cosmetic stand, it could be somewhere, tucked away somewhere else. We kind of approach the science behind it. So we do a lot of cool techie stuff. I don't even know if this is 5-year-old language, very honestly. But we do a lot of cool techie stuff to kind of make sure that there's always going to be access to these products today, tomorrow, in the future, 5 years from now. That's essentially what we do. We de-risk their future.
Nice. I love that. That was both very good explanations for a 5-year-old. I think that also shows a good trust in what a 5-year-old can understand, I think, which often people underpitch. So most 5-year-olds I know are very smart.
They do, yeah, they are smart. And, times are changing.
Yeah, exactly.
They might know more about this than perhaps we do.
I'll come back to both of you for adult listeners. Maybe Prithvi first. Give us your elevator pitch. What does Extracellular do?
Well, so essentially we are a company who helps a lot of startups or even large corporates in the space kind of de-risk that journey. So they can be, at a point where they have a concept or an idea, or even have like a small scale sort of lab demonstration experiment that they're like, oh, this is what we want to take forward. We help bridge that gap to commercialization, which means that we take on all of the engineering, the bioprocess engineering, or even the R&D to kind of help them get to a point where it's a commercially viable product.
And what kind of stage are you as a business?
So we are fairly a small company. We were founded in 2022, which means that, we have spent a lot of time very much focused on the tech and the engineering side of it. We do have our own R&D facilities and our manufacturing plant as well. So yeah, that's where we are. And we're based in Bristol, by the way. Don't know if that's relevant,
Nice.
but yeah.
And Karen? coming to you, tell us the kind of elevator pitch for NAPIC.
Yes, so NAPIC is a UK government-funded innovation knowledge centre. There are a few different innovation knowledge centres that have been funded in areas of emerging technology. And ours is really around what's called alternative proteins, which are proteins that aren't derived from animal agriculture, basically. And the idea behind the innovation knowledge centres is that they help translate the scientific discoveries into companies and help businesses in the area to grow. So that they can actually, manufacture and get products on the market.
And what kind of businesses do you support and work with?
So we've got a large number of partners across different areas. So some of them are large food companies who are looking at alternative protein products as a supplement or augmentation of their current product line. Others are startups, small companies in the area that have come from an academic research lab who's made a discovery and want to get that onto the market, and pretty much everything in between.
So you're kind of greasing the wheels of that scaling journey.
Yeah, exactly. The idea is that we can help as much as possible to actually take this really good science and make sure that it's turned into products that people can eat.
And you're only at the beginning of your journey, right? There's a lot to come from NAPIC. It's quite a new organization.
Yes, we started August of 2024, funded initially for a 5-year phase with possibility of extension.
Okay, exciting. So watch this space for those in this area.
Exactly. And I would encourage anyone who's interested in learning more about it. We have a website, and also if there are people working in the space who want to become members, it's free to join.
Okay, amazing. We'll have all of the links for both of you as well in the show notes. So for anyone who's curious, you'll be able to find out more there. So big question to set some context for the audience, those who might not be familiar. I'll come to you, Prithvi. What is cultivated meat?
Right, so cultivated meat as an industry, it first came up because people wanted they wanted a solution for food security, really. They wanted an option that they can explore to support sustainability as well, and also just accessibility to food. That was another reason why there was a lot of interest from the biotech community, from the scientific world, to identify ways to look into an alternative source of food. So cultivated meat essentially involves taking a small amount of cells and then propagating that cell material to a form where you can actually scale that up using something called bioreactors, which are very similar to fermenters that are used in other industries like the brewing industry, for example. And then at the end of it, using that material to actually generate food products. And that kind of takes away the need to go back to an animal or use material it kind of bypasses the requirement to actually have meat coming from the conventional sources. And this is a good alternative to provide to consumers.
And what kind of stage is cultivated meat at in terms of scale and reach?
I mean, I've been in this space for 6 years, maybe now. And it's definitely had its journey, where initially it was a very novel concept. It would have taken a lot more explaining, even from me, I guess, at this point, to convey what that is to people. But I think now we're at a point where a lot of people are aware of or even have heard of this term. Somewhere there are a lot of countries in the world now who have approved the sale of cultivated meat as well. There are countries where cultivated meat is available in supermarkets, in restaurants. So it's more accessible to the public at this point. So yeah, it's gone from an early idea to an actual, a point where people are like, oh, it's there. People can see it, they can buy it, they can taste it. And then, yeah, as part of that, of course, there are other countries who are very much looking into this space as well. The UK being an example with the cell cultivated sandbox that has come up. So definitely, yeah, a lot more progress that has happened.
And what would you say, maybe Karen, you can answer this, what would you say have been the technical barriers to cultivated meat, and what's still ahead of us in terms of us all being able to eat a cultivated meat burger on a regular basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, I think the biggest challenge has been the cost of manufacturing, because taking those few cells and actually getting enough to feed a person, if you think about a lot of the similar techniques are used to make medicines, but you only take a small amount of medicine, maybe a tablet. But if you think about eating a meal, you're eating a few hundred grams at a time. And the initial sort of production procedures that people were using were, adding a lot of very costly ingredients to the medium. And so I think if I'm not mistaken, the first ever burger that was made cost something like $27,000. So obviously that's not something that you could bring to supermarket shelves. But I think a lot of strides have been made over the past, say, 3 or 4 years, where people have looked at ways of reducing the costs, of making the cells grow better so that you get more out of each production run and things like that. And then in parallel, I think the product formulation, or what else do you mix into the product, is something that people are working on. So it will taste a lot like meat because it comes from animals, but for example, if you have a sausage, there are other things in a sausage. So thinking about what else you might put in with it.
It's a general issue, right, with alternative proteins, or maybe not an issue, but a challenge that they're trying to solve, which is how do you create something that is like enough that people feel like it's the same kind of thing, or do you create something that tastes and feels completely different?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a variety of alternative proteins, and some of those are based on plant proteins like pea or soya. And to make those taste like meat requires quite a lot of work. Whereas, if you're taking cells from a cow, it should taste very similar to material from a cow, or a product that comes from a cow to begin with. But there are still some things that, are slightly different. And so trying to make sure that it's something people actually want to eat, and that the cost is a cost that they're willing to pay as well.
Yeah. And I was going to ask about commercial challenges, but I guess just the cost of the meat itself is a key one, right? Are there any other kind of commercial scale-up challenges, like to do with partnerships or to do with the market, that either of you have encountered in your work so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think scaling up is challenging, and I think Prithvi could talk about that much more knowledgeably than me. So even without the cost factor, just sort of having large enough factories and facilities to make this for the general population is a bit of a challenge.
So how is extracellular helping to solve some of these technical scale-up challenges?
Yeah, so from our side, we have invested into setting up infrastructure that companies can have access to. We also help to facilitate a lot of the requirements to even support not just the final commercial production, but also a few steps early on. So challenges with scale up, intensifying processes, so we can drive down the production costs as well. And then the longer term, making sure that our production scales are in line with what a company would want to be able to scale up to be able to actually sell product. So that's where we come in to kind of make sure that we support the industry the best we can. It also means that we work quite closely with regulatory bodies as well, just to make sure that everything we do is in line with what's expected or has been put into place from a safety and even, of course, the regulatory framework as it is. Which also means that it might not just be the UK. It might be Singapore, it might be the US, many different geographies where companies also want to be at a point where they can sell this material at. So it does just mean a bit more of a deep dive from our side to be able to set this up.
Yeah, to be experts in how to navigate the regulation. Yeah, absolutely, because it varies substantially between countries at the moment, right?
It varies based on the level of progress as well. So, for example, a few countries have started, they started approving cultivated meat fairly earlier on, Singapore being an example. And then the US as well have their own framework that they had established. And now countries like the UK and then, of course, around EU or even New Zealand, Australia, they have their own frameworks that they've either developed or are developing. So there's a lot more, you kind of always need to know or be up to date with what is happening, what are the requirements out there and how does that align?
So it must be so challenging, right? I mean, it's part of the problem you're solving for these companies, but
absolutely,
it's so challenging to keep up. And I think when you're selling into a new market, fundamentally you are limited by all of these differences in regulation, and it does slow you down substantially. Are there any particular geographies that you think are doing really well in terms of regulation? So really well balancing the safety aspect with the capacity for innovation?
I think that's an interesting question, because I think, to be honest, a lot of the countries that have established frameworks or are establishing frameworks, they're all taking input from the key players in the industry. So they're all opening up conversations, dialogues with people in the space, bringing in experts as well, academic, non-academic experts, to really talk through what they think, might be feasible or even de-risk the sort of framework that they're looking to set up. So very honestly, I think the approach across is aligned. I think it's a novel field, it's a novel technology. I think it's a natural progress of how companies or countries rather, are approaching it.
It sounds, in some ways, the building in of the different partners sounds very similar to NAPIC, right? I mean, I remember reading about your work. I think you have over 120 different partners, which is amazing considering, how early stage you are in some ways as an organization. In terms of your work to support, I know, alternative proteins generally, but specifically for cultivated meat, what does that support look like?
So I think on a few different levels. So kind of coming back to the regulation a little bit, the Food Standards Agency has had this dialogue open through a cell cultivated products sandbox, and there were a few academic hubs that were invited to input into this, NAPIC being one of them. So that's been really interesting because I think where we contribute to the conversation is to say, here's the kind of research that's being done in universities that would eventually be coming through. And then the manufacturers are talking about their current processes and what they do. So we've been inputting into that. And I think for us, it's also been really interesting to hear, the differences between what would be considered more traditional food production or agricultural based production and some of the things that are being done. We're also doing a lot of small research grants between companies and academics. So if a company has a specific problem that's preventing them from being able to commercialize, they can look around, find someone at a university that knows a specific technique or has some experience with a particular type of cell, and we can fund a small amount of work there to help get them over the hump or the hurdle that's preventing them from moving forward. And then we're also very interested in infrastructure mapping, so trying to identify companies in various places that have facilities like Extracellular does, also in other areas of cultivated meat. So if it's something plant-based or based on microbial fermentation, if a company is looking for someone near them that has extrusion, for example, trying to help them make a partnership or identify a piece of equipment that they can rent access to, because often they won't want to invest in it until they're sure that they need it. So they want to do a demo run or a trial to make sure that it's what they actually need for a technology before spending the money.
Right. So it's that early stage testing process. I mean, in some ways, both of you are filling that gap, right, in different ways. So fundamentally, the cost, the capex of investing into a facility to do cultivated meat is really substantial. It's a really tough funding market. This is sort of solving that problem in some ways because you're allowing the testing to happen in more of a, I guess, like a fractional sense, like a temporary sense. Which allows for breakthroughs. And you said the matching between different individuals in the ecosystem, I imagine, is really key. Cultivated meat is still feels like quite a small ecosystem in the UK currently, but I would imagine across alternative proteins or precision fermentation kind of similar technologies, there are very many useful connections that can be made that aren't, because people are kind of focused on that lane, that you're filling that gap and bringing those people together.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's really hard to find people even, sort of Googling, you'll get many things, and you're not sure which ones are relevant. So having someone who has knowledge of who has what equipment, who has which expertise is useful. And then there are also, not just the cell culture or the bioreactor kinds of things, but also analytical capabilities. So being able to measure what you're making and look for different contaminants or make sure that things are behaving the way that you expect them to be. So even though an individual researcher in a university may not have worked with cultivated meat specifically, they may have a particular type of analytical technology that's useful, and we can help make that connection also.
Yeah, I mean, one of my our long-term clients at Adopter is called Malta, so I'm sure you're both familiar with their work. Yeah. And they're probably one of the people on your map, right? Because they're helping to develop media far faster and better than other people can currently do for culture meat as one application, but also for biopharma and other things. So it's a good example of something that can be applied to multiple markets for mutual benefit because of the technology innovation they've managed to create.
I'm going to be cheeky and say that we also do media development very well, just as FYI. And we also address key challenges in the industry.
Yeah, go on, tell us more.
No, I feel like I'm raining on a parade. So I'm like, okay, maybe not. But yes, definitely, we know them very well as well. But you know what? Like, honestly, it's an ecosystem where everybody needs to work together. And the more the merrier, because, we can have one or two people saying, yes, we do it, great. But unless everyone works together on it and it's a common issue that has been addressed by people in the space, technology is key over here. And the faster we can move in terms of innovation, getting the tech to a point where you're like, okay, does it have an impact, a real world impact? I think that's what's needed to drive this industry forward. So, as I said, the more the merrier. I just wanted to throw that spanner right into the wheel.
No, I love it. No, this is exactly
being cheeky.
Please be cheeky. I love it when people do that. Okay, so it sounds like the cultivated meat as a whole is quite a small ecosystem currently, to the point where people have to help each other and move each other forward.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, you're all kind of driving towards the same goal.
Absolutely.
Regulation, as we touched on, is definitely a difficult barrier. Can you give us, maybe for the listeners who are not so familiar with cultivated meat, a broad breakdown of where different regions sit in terms of regulation? I know there's been some pushback in Europe, for example, around cultivated meat recently.
In terms of regulations, a key area, and I think I'm happy to share my thoughts on this, is that there is a need for harmonization across. So I do think, yes, some countries around the world, let's say the US or even Europe, they have perhaps a different approach, where some of the states or even member states have essentially voiced opinions that, maybe might not be favorable for cultivated meat. But I think in the longer run, everyone's working towards the same thing. And I do think that still, irrespective of that, it's very easy to have a conversation with any one of these regulatory bodies around the world. And the opinion coming from the scientific part of the industry remains well received, is my thoughts on it. But I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think also the regulations can seem like a barrier, but they're also necessary for consumers to be confident in buying something, right? To know that it will be safe. And so it's a necessary process. And I think what's been interesting about it is just that these are very different food production technologies than existing ones. And so thinking about which parts of existing food certification processes apply and don't apply, and how will this be different, and where might it need a little bit more thinking about what are going to be the hazards, or what things don't necessarily apply. A potential example is that there won't be any abattoir involved in this process.
Right.
So anything that was kind of designed to prevent contamination in the abattoir is obviously not going to be relevant.
Yeah. I mean, also it's important to understand why cultivated meat is something that people are exploring, right? You take a small sample from the cow goes off and lives a long and happy life, and then kind of you then are able to create cultivated meat from that process. It's also a much more some ways palatable process, in my opinion.
Yeah, from an animal welfare standpoint, yeah definitely. And not all, but I do know some vegans who are open to eating it, right? Because there's no sort of animal cruelty involved in it. So
yeah, interesting. One thing I wanted to ask both of you is there's been obviously pushback, I think, from following a hype cycle and generally amongst consumers around alternative proteins. And I'm curious to hear what you both think is the value add, like the way you talk about alternative proteins now to maybe a more skeptical audience. Like, what do you lead with when you describe the benefits of alternative proteins and speaking to consumers?
This might be more of a personal preference, but I've always leaned more towards food security because, for me growing up, I grew up in Asia, Middle East, etc. So that has always been something that has been personal to me. And the ability to now have options or alternative food sources that are available around the world, I think that is, it's important for me as a person. And I think when I do have to talk about alternative proteins or alternative food sources, I think that's where that comes in. But yeah, I'm not sure if Karen has.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that, definitely. And I think the UK imports a lot of food. So that's, something that we have to think about. I think there's also sort of general climate and sustainability angles, which for some consumers are important. For others, they don't mind as much. And for some people, it's all about the taste. And so I think, innovative recipes that use these products can go a long way to catching people who are foodies and catching their attention and getting them to try things. And then if they taste good, they'll continue to buy them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely that consumer personally. Like, happily, we'll try cultivated meat, we'll try anything kind of cricket based, or like bugs are very common as an alternative. Well, it's not alternative protein; it's just a protein, but as a maybe different to a diet that you might be used to in the UK. I'm definitely that consumer. I think I'm always ready to try new things, so that would definitely work on me. And I think to the food, security point. A lot of our work at the moment at Adopter is focused on building kind of national resilience through green technologies, and also on adaptation to climate change. So in the context of farming being limited, or weather conditions, meaning that the soil quality is poor, or that it's not possible to farm in the same way as before, alternative proteins offer a lifeline really for feeding, as you say, a growing population.
Yeah. One of our co-directors, Derek Stewart, who's at James Hutton Institute, often makes the point that probably in 20 or 30 years, you won't be able to grow things in East Anglia anymore. Part of it will be underwater, part of it will be a desert. So there's going to have to be some thinking about how to make sure that there's enough food for everyone, even in places that are relatively food secure at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. The food security is not this established thing that we're used to. It's very much changeable. So no, I think those are really strong value drivers as a whole, as well as the welfare, the environmental benefits, etc., that we've discussed already.
I think it also comes down to the fact that, as a consumer, you walk into a supermarket, you're like, okay, what do I fancy today? And you look at options around, you're like, oh, I could try this, I can try that. And then there's a story behind that option where, there was a certain impact that food product kind of brought in as part of its development, as part of its commercial journey. And I think conveying that message to the consumer then becomes important as well, because they might just pick it up and be like, oh, that's great. But then really understanding the fact that, it has an impact that's associated. I think this is the interesting part about coming up with any sort of novel food technology, really.
So, Karen, as an academic who's working at the really kind of early stage of some of these technologies, how important do you think the role of science communication is when speaking to the wider public to then affect the positive scaling journey of these types of technologies?
I think it's so important. I mean, I think the general public are really the end user as the consumer. So for them to be willing to try it, for them to be happy that research is going on in this area, NAPIC is publicly funded. So for them to be happy that taxpayer money is going into this, it's very important. And I think we've tried to tackle that on multiple levels. So we do a lot of outreach to schools and school children. That's also about, trying to get people into the field. There's a nice science museum exhibit, which some colleagues of mine from Imperial College were involved in helping put together on the future of food. Which
I went to that. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was honestly unbelievable. I loved it.
So eye-catching, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then also within NAPIC, we also have a pillar around consumer attitudes, behaviors, and adoption. So my colleague Louise Dye, who's a professor at the University of Sheffield, leads that, and we're running surveys through Ipsos to try to understand what people's attitudes are, what they find interesting, what the potential barriers are, and what we need to be thinking about, and kind of repeating those over time as things become available, and seeing if consumer attitudes are changing, and if there are particular things that are more favorable or less favorable, and whether we need to be changing what we're researching, depending on what those answers are.
It's really interesting because I think some of your work is really around trying to break down barriers between different groups of people that typically are very siloed. So specifically academics, for example, tend to kind of speak to other academics in one space, and then there's all this amazing innovation and brilliant thinking that's being kind of focused in one area. How do you find, like I said before, 120 plus partners, maybe more now, how do you find that works in practice? What's the partnership mechanism that you've used to bring those people together effectively?
I think a lot of it is about one-on-one conversations, understanding what people need, what their way of thinking is. So yeah, I think the prototype of the academic is sort of the absent-minded professor droning on while no one's really listening to them. We try not to be like that. But also, I think depending on which stage a company is at, whether they're small, they've just spun out, whether they're larger, there are different challenges there. If you think about a big food company moving into the space, they have a lot of infrastructure and ways of working that are sort of geared towards one thing, and for them to invest the time and money and effort into pivoting, they have, different kinds of questions than someone who's developed a technology and is then thinking about growing it. So there's no one size fits all approach. I think it has to be a lot of tailored one-on-one support. That said, I think there are a lot of challenges that cross cuts all types of alternative proteins, not just cultivated meat. So, things around access to infrastructure, scaling, things around having the potential of nature being unlocked. So there are different food sources that could be the starting point for any production process. And I think, if you're working on cultivated meat, it will be a type of animal cell, but there are many different types. There are different breeds of even the same kind of animal. So, there's a lot of diversity out there in biology that can be harnessed for different production.
Interesting. It's why NAPIC is so crucial, right? Or helping to connect those dots.
Yeah, and it does take time and effort, but I think it's a labor of love for us.
Yeah.
We're all super passionate about making sure that this works.
And then you're obviously head of partnerships.
Oh, yeah.
So what has your approach been to partnerships at Extracellular?
Well, I think, as I said before, like one of the main things that we really need to do as an industry is try and facilitate those discussions, those sort of collaborations that unlock a lot of the key challenges that are faced. This also does branch out into other areas. For example, if we are looking at, per se, we do strongly believe in investing in training young talent for the future. So really, one of our things that we do, we have established a partnership with the University of Bristol, for example, and we are running a boot camp with them over the next month or so to really train graduates coming out of STEM degrees in terms of bioprocess engineering, getting them up and running, really, to get them to understand what it means to be in a cell-cultivated product project, really, or what that looks like. What is the technology? What does it mean? What's the impact behind it? Where does that lie in terms of the ecosystem as a whole? And it's one of the strong things that we want to focus on, and which is great. And having a collaborator like the University of Bristol is great to be able to do that as well. And then we also do have partnerships with some large corporates as well, really to help drive that food requirement, because safety, of course, is a big area of focus for a product going to market, but also access to raw materials, supply chains associated. It's very important for us to be able to do that. So this is where such sort of partnerships come into play. We also do have other partnerships in place with technical experts in the area, where we can then tap into resources as needed as well. And it could be a equipment supplier, it could be, certain parts that are required, or even like specific technologies that are relevant to cell-cultivated products. But also, I've been on the phone occasionally with Karen, where I've been like, this is a very novel idea. What do you think? So I think having that opportunity just to pick up a phone call, and be like, hey, I need help, maybe. Can you tell me how to approach this? So I think that is the position that we are at. And as part of that, we also do work very closely with the government in the UK. So Will, who's our CEO, he works quite closely with the Engineering Biology Steering Committee. He's part of that, actually. And as well, we do work closely with the FSA, for example, just to make sure that, we are also contributing the best we can to this novel space. And we also are part of BBIA's community as well. And we also work with other associations around the country, but also internationally, we do work quite closely with a lot of those associations as well, who kind of drive that conversation around cellular agriculture, or even circular bioeconomy, or even sustainability as a whole. So that's where we come in from. And one of the other areas that I personally support strongly is really women in STEM as well. And, look at this coincidence. I guess we're all women here today. But definitely it's an area that I think, is, again, it's a personal endeavor that I have taken on, because I remember when I was young and I had no idea what to do in life, which does, I'm sure brings back memories.
Everyone's been there. Yeah.
I really, at that point, would have appreciated having access or exposure to certain conversations, dialogues, talks, where somebody had kind of, I wouldn't say, I had a clear path when I was younger about what I wanted to do, but at least somebody who had tried different things and, they were like, okay, this is what I want to do, this is not what I want to do, and just had exposure to novel tech, and had taken an unorthodox approach, perhaps, to what they should be doing. So yeah, so I think that's a few areas that we focus on.
Yeah, I mean, I think those networks all sound extremely valuable. I was going to ask you, how they've provided you business value, but I guess it's, inordinate, really. Like, is it?
Yeah, I think, if business value is tied very strongly to the progress of the industry. So, okay, it could be cell-cultivated products as a whole, everything under it. So there's food, cosmetics, biomaterials, even, nutraceuticals, etc. So it kind of brings everything together. And the more that these partnerships are in play, are in action, it unlocks a lot of key challenges. The only way for a business to grow, being part of an industry, is to help facilitate that journey for other companies or the industry as a whole, very honestly.
Would you say that partnership building is really central to your commercial strategy at Extracellular?
Yeah, and I think it's also something that if you've met Will as well, who's our CEO, I know I've said this a few times, but yes, I remind myself too.
CEO Will.
CEO Will, yes. Him and as well as me, I guess personality-wise, we're both very people oriented.
Yeah.
That's what we are. And I think we have significant connections in the space. We know a lot of people. We're naturally, those people who want to know more about what they're doing, what challenges are they facing, what are they thinking of, where do they want to be in this year, next year. We're those sort of people. So very honestly, it aligns quite well to how that kind of ties into the commercial strategy as well. And as I said, it's a key area of focus for us, and it's probably similar to what NAPIC also do. So I think it's the baseline.
I think ecosystem building benefits everyone.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as you say, when the market is small, fundamentally everyone's activities benefit each other. So you might as well support and grow, and that's the stage of the industry as a whole, particularly for cultivated meat, which is earlier, I would say, than a lot of other alternative proteins.
Yeah. And, dialogues are key here, because at the end of the day, everybody needs to know where this industry is going to get to. They need to have a common aligned vision for them to all work towards it. So I think it just makes sense.
What do you think that the industry needs to do as a group to allow for more collaboration to move it forward?
I guess one interesting thing is that because things are so early, I think there's a lot of baseline science that still needs to be understood. And I think that benefits everyone. And there are examples from other areas of research where companies have come together and sort of worked together on that baseline science because they know it's a crucial gap that needs to be filled. And then therefore they can then kind of go off and do what they want. So an example from medicines manufacturing is there used to be an industry club called BRIC, Bioprocess Research Industry Club. And I think it was kind of born of the idea that there were a lot of similar challenges around medium development, bioreactor design, and things like that everybody needed to solve. And so there was this idea that, even though it would be a joint resource, it was something pre-competitive and therefore something that people needed access to. And I think given the fact that cultivated meat is a small community and very, very open, I think there's probably a scope for something similar.
Yeah. I mean, one challenge that you must have is accessing talent, right? Because fundamentally it's a small group to the point where people are working together on things to move the industry forward. How do you access the right people in your work?
I think this goes back to what I was mentioning earlier about things like, a boot camp with the University of Bristol, or even like a training internship, etc. From our side, we want people to be at a point where they know what this technology looks like, what they can contribute to it. And the only way for them to be able to do that and for us to be able to develop that talent is by being able to share what we do and then being able to kind of give them tools to build those skills. And, everybody loves innovation. Everybody wants to learn, really. And especially the generation that we're now working with, it's amazing because the amount of curiosity, the interest coming through, just like the motivation, the enthusiasm is incredible. And, it's absolutely lovely to see and be part of that.
That must be refreshing to see so much great
Yeah, I absolutely love it. It's great because, you're like, wow. And they ask questions, which honestly are so refreshing because you're like, that's great. I'll get back to you in 3 working days.
What do they give us an example? What do they ask?
Sometimes it's questions that go deeper than just, like like tech itself. Sometimes it's questions around impact or like why did a concept come about, which is great because at some point you got to remind yourself about that being part of a technology field, because you're like, oh, this is an industry that we've all been part of for so long, and then it's just so refreshing, and you're like, I love this.
Yeah, it must be amazing as well to see to be part of an industry where everything is a new discovery.
Yeah,
like it's moving forward.
Absolutely.
There's so much potential, and there is so much need. That's what we've discussed.
The pace of innovation, right? Yeah. Like it's great because you're like, okay, great. This industry needs to move, and like, let's do it.
It's hard to raise money for cultivated meat at the moment. There was a big hype, and then there was some delay because all technology takes time, and there was a few high-profile kind of failures in the industry. How are new cultivated meat companies or companies that are trying to scale supposed to raise funding in this environment?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think this happens quite a lot with new technologies, that there's sort of that early investment phase, and then investors may not be that patient. I think with a lot of these deep tech kinds of ventures, investors need to be willing to leave their money in for a very long period of time. And oftentimes, if there's someone coming from investment, say in software, they're not used to the timescales of development of some of these products. But I think this happens quite a lot. And usually what happens is a phase of consolidation, and then new technologies are invented, and then there's another upswing. So I'm confident that there will be another upswing. I think geopolitical events probably not helpful in this period of time, but I do think that it's something that will rebound. But I think what a lot of the more innovative companies are doing is really diversifying what they're doing, so they know it'll be a longer time scale to get approval for human consumption. So they're looking at other products that they can make in the meantime. So, for example, there's a company called Meatly who's in the pet food market, where the regulations are slightly different. They're able to get approval and sell in pet foods while they're working on getting approval for human consumption. There are other things that can be made in similar kinds of cell culture, which could be a revenue stream for companies while they're working on development and getting regulatory approval of other products.
It's also a constantly evolving space as well, right? So all the information or knowledge that comes through, that it's kind of constantly fed in, so that people know, they're like, oh, okay, there's now a regulatory framework that you work towards, or there's a different approach that's perhaps better. So I think it's a constantly sort of evolving space. And as people go through that journey, it's only natural to kind of see that sort of curve that Karen was talking about, which is really the journey of novel tech.
And I like the idea about finding other ways to get revenue into the business rather than doing this kind of huge moonshot for the big cultivated meat prize, because it's an easier bet for an investor, right? Because there's definitely a market that exists. It's growing, Meatly doing really well, and it doesn't. You're not trying to sell, believe in me, believe in this market, believe in the regulation. There's a lot of unknowns in that pitch. You're going for something that is more tangible and focused on revenue in a shorter time period.
Yeah, I think exactly right, and I think actually the Food Standards Agency has recognized the regulation as a potential bottleneck, and they're trying to cut the approval times for dossiers down through this cell cultivated product sandbox work. And I think they're really, really committed to ensuring that things are definitely safe, but that the guidance that they're giving to companies is very clear, so they know exactly what they need to submit in the dossier and are able to do that relatively swiftly without having to add additional data, because there are things that they've missed. And they've actually recently released guidance on tasting, because one of the things that needs to be done in this process is get input from consumers on, how does it feel in your mouth? How does it taste? Do you like it? And that sort of thing. So they've developed a whole set of guidance around that, which I think will help companies a lot in their product development.
Absolutely. So you're kind of finding these more specific to the market steps that are now being catered for by the regulation.
Yes.
Interesting. Are you optimistic that it's going to move faster than it has in the past?
Yes, definitely.
Good to hear that you're optimistic. if you could change one thing about the current ecosystem, what would it be?
I think maybe I might jump in.
Yeah,
quickly.
please.
So I think, definitely there's the IP associated with a lot of these technologies that, it's very much dependent on company strategy, depending on what they want to do and depending on what the product is. But I think, of course, it makes sense for a company to hold on to that IP, and it just makes sense for them to not want to disclose certain aspects of what they're doing. But I think there is a scenario where that learning or that set of data, that understanding that has come about a certain product or challenges faced can then be dissipated into the public forum, that I think will definitely benefit not just the current set of companies in that space, but also the future. There's so many startups coming in. As an entrepreneur who wants to come up with a company at some day that addresses one of those challenges, it's a great area to be able to be like, oh, okay, that this is what has worked, this is perhaps what has not worked. So I think that would definitely be beneficial as part of this evolving ecosystem. But, as I said, it's something that would be nice to have. But at the same time, everyone's trying to fix certain challenges or make sure that the product is at a point where it can get to market. So it's something as more of an afterthought for now.
Yeah, so be more open.
Yeah,
in some ways. Yeah,
I mean, but that's, I think, with any technology, right? Like it's a fine balance between having IP security and then what you can actually share and help to promote that sort of ecosystem in the future. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I think there's a common innovation ecosystem problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Any thoughts, Karen?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think also the more data that's able to be shared, the more AI tools can be brought into the equation, because they do require a reasonably large set of high quality data. And so pooling data from different manufacturers would be very useful. And I'm definitely not an AI expert by any means, but I understand that there are some algorithms that can keep data anonymized so that the IP security is still maintained with that. So I think that's something definitely worth exploring.
That's exciting. Going to unlock a lot of things, I think. Question for both of you, but I'll come to you, Karen, first. What advice would you give to someone who is currently trying to scale a cultivated meat solution?
I would say call Extracellular.
And anything else that requires deeper innovation or, support from the NAPIC side, I'll call Karen.
Nice. Okay, good. Mutually helpful.
I mean, I think we're saying the same thing here, which means that, they talk about it. If they talk about it, if they find the right people in the space to ask questions to, find resources. There are a lot of people in the space now who are quite visible, accessible, out there on social, networks or even otherwise, and talk about it. And people will help with whatever challenge they have, be it a technical nature, a commercial nature, or just a general concept. It might just be something that like, oh, I want to try this. Like, how do I do it? And then I'm sure between a few of us in the space we can all figure out how to do.
Like come in, the water's warm, it's fine.
Like come by, have coffee with us. Let's chat.
Okay, nice. So we're coming to the end, sadly, of the episode. Do you have anything that you would like to leave the audience with? Maybe Karen, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you're in this area at all, if you're an investor, if you're a startup, if you're an academic and you want to be involved, go to our websites. You can join. It's free to join. And we do have collaborative funding programs available. There's a round which is just closing, but there will be future calls. So keep an eye out for that. And feel free to come to our conference, which is in Glasgow in October, and see what's been going on in the community.
Amazing. And like I said, all the information will be in the show notes. So we'll make sure that's all in there. Prithvi?
I think from our side, as I said, we'd love to hear from whoever, is out there listening to us right now.
Say it on the camera.
Yes. So if you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you have feedback, or just want to know what we do, on a day-to-day basis or even generally, just follow us on LinkedIn, reach out to us there or on the website. Either way, we're happy to chat. So,
okay, perfect. All right, thank you so much both for your time. And for everyone else who's listening, you can catch us on the next episode of Scaling Green Tech. Goodbye.